This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchman on the Pod. This does not seem to want to work correctly. I hope it does. I don't know, it's on rotation or something. I don't know what's going on. So, anyway, I was trying to figure out what am I going to do today because today is going to be a hot, smoldering, yucky day. So, I'm going to stay in my room because in my room I have an air conditioner in the window. First off, so I do have the dogs with me because they get hot too, so you got to have compassion on the animals. But anyway, I want to read out of the Britannica yearbook 1913 about Antarctica and the Arctic because someone had mentioned that, and I thought, oh well, yeah, that would be a fun thing to do. So that's what I'm going to read this morning. I will try to do it slow because there's like a lot of names and stuff I can't pronounce. I'm not real super smart at all, but we'll get this going. All right. This is in the Britannica Yearbook 1913, starting on page 99. Geography, Exploration, and Travel. Antarctic. The final conquest of the North Pole by Parry and the successes of British and other expeditions in the South have shifted general interest into polar exploration from the Arctic to the Antarctic. On February 11th, 1910, the French explorer Dr. Jean Charcot arrived at Punta Arenas on his ship, the Paraguay Paz, having carried on from his former expedition a coast survey as far as Adelaide Island. He discovered a great gulf to the south and saw the inaccessible coast of Alexander One land. He had wintered at Peterman Island and made excursions thence in the South Shetlands. Afterwards, again turning south, he reached 126° west, sailing between 69° and 71° south, and discovering new lands to the west and south of Alexander One land. His party suffered from scurvy. The ship was damaged in collisions with ice, and food and coal ran short. He reached Rowan in June, and results of his journey appeared later in the year of Rapport's preliminaries and Pourquoi Pause, dans l'Antarctique. That's Paris. On June 1st, 1910, Captain Robert Fulton Scott, birth 1868, dispatched the Terra Nova from London for his second Antarctic journey. She went by Cape Cod, September 2nd, and Australia to New Zealand. And in these countries, additions were received to the funds or equipment of the expedition, towards which 20,000 it looks like a euro sign almost, so it's some kind of dollar amount, had been granted by the Treasury. The expedition left New Zealand for the South on November 29th, 1910, with a larger scientific staff than had ever previously been taken. It included Dr. E. A. Wilson, a zoologist, as chief, surgeons G. M. Lovelock, zoologist, and E. L. Atkins, bacteriologist and parasitologist. Lieutenant H. L. L. Pinnell for magnetic and meteorological observations. Messrs. T. Griffith Taylor and R. E. Priestley, geologist. E. W. Wilson and D. G. Lilly, biologist. A. C. Goddard, zoologist. C. S. Wright, chemist. Dr. G. C. Simpson, physicist. Mr. H.G. Ponting, photographer, Lieutenant, afterwards Commander E.R.G. Evans was second in command, and Lieutenant V.L.A. Campbell was to lead the Eastern Party, which was intended to land in King Edward VII Land. The ship, after encountering heavy weather, entered the pack ice on December 9th. McMurdo Sound was safely reached, and the main party was landed to establish winter quarters at Cape Evans. A western party was landed on the western side of the sound. The eastern party was prevented by ice cliffs from landing on King Edward VII Land, as was intended, but did so on February 18, 1911, at Cape Adare. From the Terra Nova, investigations were subsequently carried on in the neighborhood of the Baldney Islands, and new mountainous land was twice observed to the west of Cape North. About 69 degree 50 dash, I don't know what that is. It's like a little apostrophe almost on top of the 50, so I don't know what these are. And then 68 degree, and then a 30, another apostrophe on top there, south. And 163 degree with a 20 with the apostrophe, and then a slash, 158 degree with a 15 apostrophe east. I don't know how to read. I think these are like maritime distances. I don't really know. All right. Stewart Island was reached on the homeward journey on March 27, 1911. The ship returned south in the following summer and brought back news of the year's work. Campbell's party at Cape Adare had experienced heavy weather and had not apparently been able to proceed far afield, but meteorological and magnetic observations had been made. The Terra Nova embarked them on January 4th, 1912, and landed them again in Terra Nova Bay, Victoria Land, on the 18th. It was intended that they should re-embark in February after exploration over land, but this was impossible, and they would have to find their own way back to McMurdo Sound. The Western Party had made important geological and other investigations. They were taken off the ship on February 15th. The main party was occupied in scientific work in various directions, besides laying depots for the advance towards the pole. Dr. E.A. Wilson, writing from McMurdo Sound on October 31st, 1911, reported that regular observations has been made of the atmospheric pressure, temperature, and velocity and direction of wind, and that the upper atmosphere had been studied by means of small balloons for the first time in the Antarctic. Magnetic observations, gravity, observations by pendulum, and tidal observations had been kept up. Marine biology, parasitology, and ice study had received attention. Wilson led a remarkable expedition in June to August, winter 1911, across the barrier to Cape Crozier to study the winter breeding of the emperor penguins. Petrologist investigations revealed the various mineral quartz veins. The work of the depot laying being completed, Scott with the main polar party started on November 2nd, 1911, and proceeded at first by easy stages. He reached the continental plateau by way of Beardmore Glacier on December 10th, and was left by the last supporting party on January 4th, 1912, in the 87th degree and then the 36 apostrophe south, within 150 miles of the pole. Lieutenant Evans, who led this party, was overtaken by scurvy and returned to New Zealand. April 1st, 1912, on the Terra Nova, but otherwise the health of all had been generally good. The latest news then brought from Scott was that he was about to move forward with Dr. Wilson, Captain Oates, Lieutenant Bowers, and Petty Officer Evans as his companions. It was only on February 10th, 1913, that their tragic fate became known. The Terra Nova returned that day to New Zealand, having learnt on January 18th at Cape Evans that after successfully reaching the pole on January 18th, 1912, that they're finding Amuden's tent and records, see below, and I'm not sure what they mean by see below, so it must be in the contents below. They had perished on their return journey. Petty Officer Evans had died on February 17 after an accident. The others were then caught in a prolonged blizzard 11 miles south of the one-ton camp and succumbed to exhaustion. Oates on March 17th, the others whose bodies were found by a search party under Surgeon Atkins on November 12th, about March 29th. A diary kept by Scott up to March 25th was found, in which he left a characteristically brave last message, explaining the misfortune to which their end was due, and appealing to his countrymen to provide for their dependents. It became known towards the end of 1910 that Captain Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian explorer, before making a crossing of the Arctic region, for which plans had been announced, was to visit the Antarctic and make an attempt to reach the South Pole. On February 4th, 1910, the Terra Nova found the Norwegian expedition established in the Bay of Whales, but Scott, who had heard of Amundsen's intentions in New Zealand, did not allow them to affect his own plans. News was received later that Amundsen had been successful, having reached the pole on December 14th through the 17th in 1911. His expedition was favored with good weather conditions not only for the polar march, but during practically the whole year of its sojourn to the Antarctic. While the march itself, thanks to a careful system of depots and efficient teams of sledge dogs, was carried out without any of the deprivation and suffering characteristic of previous polar journeys. The journey southward from the base, about 870 miles, occupied 56 days. The greatest elevation reached on the plateau being 10,750 feet. The return march was made in 39 days. 3 days were spent at or in the vicinity of the pole, complete observations being taken. The polar plateau was named King Haakon the Seventh Plateau, and that's Haakom. And the name of the Queen Maud, Maud, was given to a range of lofty mountains, 10,000 to 15,000 feet, which were observed between the 85° and 88° south, being a continuation of the mountains of South Victoria Land. Other investigations were carried out near and east of the Bay of Whales by a party under Lieutenant Prestrud, left behind at the base, while Nansen's famous old ship, the Fram, Fram, Captain Nelson, after landing the expedition, was employed in oceanographical research after a wide area. An expedition left Germany in May 1911. It was led by Lieutenant Filchner, who previously made a journey to Spitzbergen for the sake of experience. His plans were to proceed by way of South America to Coats Land, the coast of which was to be traced south or southwest, and a base station was to be established. An attempt was contemplated to cross the lower part of the Antarctic continent to Ross Sea. The ship, the Dutchland, was commanded by Captain R. Vassell, who had accompanied the Gauss expedition, and there was a scientific staff of 11, including Dr. Heim as geologist, Dr. W. Bruneck, oceanographer, and Dr. Barkhow, meteorologist. An Australian expedition is also in the field under the leadership of Dr. D. Mawson. Its chief support was obtained in Australia and New Zealand, the Commonwealth and state government in the former country having together contributed 22,000, whatever their money is. A British Treasury grant of 2,000 was received. The vessel, the Aurora, under the command of Captain J. K. Davis, left London on July 27, 1911, and Hobart in Tasmania for the South on December 2nd. A wireless telegraphic station was established at Macquarie Island, which was expected to be of service in obtaining the longitude of the principal base of operations in the Antarctic. On January 19, 1912, a party was landed in the previously unknown Commonwealth Bay at the western extremity of Adélie Land. It had been intended also to put a party ashore on Knox Land. This was impossible, and the ship suffered some damage from the pack ice in the attempt to carry out the plan. But a party with provision for winter quarters was put on the barrier ice in 66 degree and then the 18 apostrophe south and 94 degree and 58 apostrophe east. And the Aurora returned to Hobart on March 11th. The landing parties were fully furnished for scientific work, and the Prince of Monaco provided an oceanographical equipment on board the Aurora. A Japanese expedition under Lieutenant N. Shiraz started from Wellington, New Zealand on February 11, 1911, with the South Pole as its object. Judged by European standards, it was poorly equipped, and it returned later in the year unsuccessful. Other projects for Antarctic work have been discussed. Dr. W. S. Bruce has proposed to cross the Antarctic landmass from a base in Weddell Sea, meeting another party working from Ross Sea. Dr. A. Forbes Mackay, who accompanied Sir E. Shackleton's expedition, has made plans for the exploration of the coast between Graham Land and King Edward VII Land with a small party. A scheme has also been under the consideration of the Perry Arctic Club and the National Geographic Society of Washington for an attempt to reach the pole from a base on the opposite side of the Antarctic region to Scott's Base. Dr. H. F. Osborne has suggested that the American Department of Labor and Commerce should send an expedition to study the habitat of the southern fur seal and to make other zoological observations. And Mr. E. S. Bogg has proposed the further investigation of Wilkes Land and the verification of Wilkes' discovery. The Arctic. An American expedition was organized to explore Crocker Land. Oops, hold on 1 minute. I have an itch. Okay. Crocker Land, the northernmost land known, which was sighted by Peary in 1906 to the north of Grant Land. The expedition was to be led by Professor D.B. Macmillan and George Burroughs, who both took part in Peary's expedition in 1909. But Burrap was drowned in a canoe accident in Long Island Sound in April 1912. He was educated at Yale University, had studied in the American Museum of Natural History at New York, had worked with the United States Geological Survey, and was also a trained astronomical observer and expert photographer. It was decided to proceed with the Crocker Land expedition as a memorial to Burrap. Under the Department of Naval Service of Canada, among other hydrographical investigations, a voyage to Hudson Bay was carried out in 1910 for the study of the conditions of navigation, with particular consideration for the possibility of establishing a transatlantic route from a port on the west coast of Hudson Bay. Port Churchill and Port Nelson was on this coast, both of which have been spoken of as possible sites for a harbor and the terminus of a railway from the west, providing a new route of export for Canadian grain, were investigated by this expedition, and Port Churchill appeared to offer better prospects. Captain Berner, a Canadian voyager, attempted but failed in 1910 to 11 to make the Northwest Passage by way of Melville Island, but he carried out some valuable survey work, especially on the hitherto unknown coast of Baffin Land between Cape Catter and Fury and Hecla Strait. Mr. Stephenson's expedition returned in September 1912 from 4 years' work on the Arctic shores of Canada, where in the neighborhood of Coronation Gulf they discovered Eskimo tribes of a peculiarly light color with instances of blue eyes and red hair. Their physical characteristics and certain of their customs are identified by the explorer with those of the early Norsemen, and they are held to be descendants of immigrants from Scandinavia to Greenland. The Danish explorer Mikkelsen, who with a companion had been left in northeast Greenland in 1910 when the rest of his party was brought back to Denmark, had been given up for lost when in July 1912 both were rescued by a Norwegian fishing vessel. They had recovered records of the lost explorer Mylius Eriksson, CEB 21, page 953, dealing with his important work in the north of the island. Spitsbergen has attracted considerable scientific attention. A Norwegian expedition under G. Eikensson in June to September 1910, in addition to oceanographical observations between Bear Island and Spitsbergen, carried out a number of journeys into the interior of West Spitsbergen and neighboring islands, the expedition being divided into 5 parties. Valuable geological investigations were made. Other expeditions have been numerous. The discovery of coal in the district of Advent Bay and the attempts made to exploit it have drawn special attention to this locality. 3 Russian expeditions were at work in 1911 in Novaya Zemlya. Important geographical and botanical and zoological observations were made, and discoveries of some economic interest were thought of naphtha and copper. I wonder what that is. It's NAPHTHA and copper. Naphtha and copper. We'll have to look that up. Russian explorers have also been active in Siberia. The expedition of M.A.K. Volosovik between the Kolyma and the Lenin of the MTA Yamalek east of the Kolyma in 1909 which incidentally revealed considerable errors in existing maps, proved the possibility of a sea route for trade between the Kolyma and Bering Strait. This route was successfully exploited in 1911 from Vladivostok and is considered to be capable of commercial development. Really? And then that ends that, brothers and sisters. The next one is Asia, and then it goes on down to New Guinea. But I think there's a lot of things to really kind of look into that, because honestly, I think they've changed the whole map thing, and I really don't think we even know what this world looks like. I really don't. I really don't. I think they did back then. They did more, but I think they've covered it up. That's what I believe, but who knows? I'm a conspiracy theorist, I guess. I don't know. I just don't believe and trust anybody. But anyway, that right there is on the Antarctica stuff. And this is, oh, looky here. Somebody has a little map in here. How weird is that? So, like I said, this is this is a used book I just got. And for some reason in here, it's like a newspaper clipping. And it's got Arabia on one side, the Red Sea, Italianan, Africa, East. I don't even know what this is all about. Sudan's over here. It's an old newspaper clipping. How interesting. I love to find things like that in the books that I buy. But anyway, this right here, this has the contents, and there's so much in this little book. It's most amazing. But it'll go from like part 1, the international and general, section 2, science, section 3, arts and literature, section 4, archaeology and evacuations, section 5, philosophy, education, and religion. And it's got a whole section of Catholic in here. I see. I didn't read it yet, but I seen that. Section 6, law and justice, section 7, engineering and industry. 8, sports and games, American sports. Well, that's crazy. And then in part 2, you got national and local. And just a whole bunch of stuff. Well, that's pretty cool. Anyway, then section 3, you got foreign countries. So you got Austria, Hungary, Belgium, China, Denmark, Egypt, Sudan, France, Germany, Greece, and the Balkan Straits, Holland, Italy, Japan, the Latin American Republic, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Ecuador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Salvador, Santo Domingo, Uruguay, Venezuela, Liberia, Monaco, Morocco, Norway, Persia. Isn't that funny, Persia? That's really Iran. Portugal, Russia, Siam. I don't know where that's at. Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey. And that's what we got. And then it has general statistics, the list of members of the 63rd United States Congress, votes United States presidential election 1908, votes United States presidential election 1912, and then the index. So that is what's in this little informative book that's really super cool. And it did not cost me much at all because, I can't afford to spend a ton of money on books. But anyway, I'm thinking about buying another one. I just, every now and then I'll type in, like old years, like 1913, 1920. I tried the 1953 one, but that's totally out of range because that's right before they did that Antarctica treaty or whatever they did. Something crazy to where everything's secret and hush-hush now. So anyway, all right, brothers and sisters, that ends that. I figured I would do that. I thought it would be fun to read it out loud, and somebody had suggested it, so I hope that I didn't ruin it and that you understood it and that you can glean some information of what you're looking for in that reading. Keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book. which is, whoops, go on, you better go see, the Word of God, and embed the Word of God upon the tables of your hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. All right, till next time, be blessed.